Times report today that indicated that a neurologist had visited the White House 8 times in the last year. Here is the full explanation of how that has nothing to do with President Biden and President Biden's health, and that the kind of out-of-control behavior by the White House, most of the White House press corps, not all, most of the White House press corps today, was as bad a circus as it looked like. The president's physician, Kevin O'Connor, has publicly released a memo that is directed to Karine Jean-Pierre, basically in response to what she had to go through today in the White House press briefing. And it explains in more detail something that Karine Jean-Pierre explained today, which is that the White House medical unit does not treat just the president. Many, many White House staffers are treated by the White House medical unit, some cabinet members, and over 1,000 members of the military are serviced in the White House by the White House medical unit. Over 1,000 members of the military who serve nearby and in the White House. And so Dr. O'Connor reveals today that in this memo, many military personnel experience neurological issues related to their service. And Dr. Kennard regularly visits the White House medical unit as part of this general neurology practice. The White House physician had already reported that in President Biden's annual physical, he is examined by a neurologist. That's once a year, not 8 times a year, once a year. And that neurologist is that same neurologist, Kevin Kennard. And so elsewhere in the memo, it says Dr. Kennard was the neurological specialist that examined President Biden for each of his annual physicals. His findings have been made public each time I have released the results of the president's annual physical. President Biden has not seen a neurologist outside of his annual physical. And so the White House press corps that wanted to know, wanted the White House today to confirm that this neurologist had visited the White House 8 times. And that's information that is only available to the press corps because the Biden White House reveals the records of every visitor of the White House. How many times did a neurologist visit the Trump White House? The White House press corps has no idea and will never know because the Trump White House never, ever released the White House visitor logs. How many cardiologists visited the White House during Donald Trump's time there? We have no idea because the Trump White House hid all of that information. The only reason the New York Times knows that this doctor was in the White House logs is because the White House, the Biden White House, unlike the Trump White House, makes that information public. The memo goes on to say the results of this year's physical exam by President Biden were detailed in my February 28th letter. And it said this on February 28th about President Biden's physical exam. It says an extremely detailed neurological exam was again reassuring in that there were no findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorder such as stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis. Nor are there any signs of cervical myelopathy. This exam did again support a finding of peripheral neuropathy in both feet. No motor weakness was detected. He exhibits no tremor, either at rest or with activity. He demonstrates excellent fine motor dexterity, but a subtle difference in heat-cold sensation could be elicited as it was last year. This heat-cold sensation deficit was detected a couple of inches higher on his ankle calf this year, which is not unexpected. There may, in fact, be day-to-day subjective variation of these findings, as during last year's exam. This area of sensation deficit was actually found to be smaller than the year before. This information that I just read has been public since February 28th. Absolutely no neurological issues whatsoever in the president's physical exam. And now we know that the neurologist who conducted the neurology part of that annual exam was Dr. Kennard, who has, for other purposes, for completely different purposes, visited the White House 8 times, according to the White House visitor logs that are available to the press only because the Biden White House allows those to be made public after the Trump White House banned those from ever being seen by anyone. That's one of the big differences between the presidency of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. One of the smaller differences, one of the least dangerous differences between them, although it is extremely risky, especially in Trump world, not to have any record, no idea who has actually visited the White House. That could actually be a very risky proposition for this country to be living with, a White House where you have no idea who's going in and out. We have other issues to talk about tonight, and we will. But this breaking news about what the New York Times thought today was its giant scandalous scoop that a neurologist had visited the White House 8 times, and that the White House press corps treated as the most important news to hit that room in, I don't know, as long as there has been a Biden presidency, that's for sure. The grotesque behavioral overreaction by the White House press corps today, most, not all, of the White House press corps, was on display on video. It has now been answered in full and completely by Dr. O'Connor, President Biden's physician in the White House. So that controversy's done. And the stock market's reaction to Joe Biden's renewed commitment today to stay in the race was to once again hit an all-time record high. The stock market has repeatedly hit new highs during Joe Biden's presidency, and it did once again today. I only wish I knew what the stock market was going to do tomorrow, but I don't. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in the stock market or anywhere else. There are a lot of people who think they do know what's going to happen tomorrow or what should happen tomorrow, especially in the presidential campaign, and their pontifications and predictions are plentiful. Dozens of articles and opinion pieces have appeared just in the New York Times alone about exactly how and why and when Joe Biden should drop out of the presidential campaign, along with some reasonable proposals and some utter fantasies about how to get new names on the Democratic presidential ballot. Most of those essays are fantasies by people who, in every important sense, do not know what they are talking about and wildly underestimate degree of difficulty and risk in their own proposals. And so, because I know anyone craving the cheap high of political prediction talk can easily find it elsewhere, I will humbly devote our coverage this hour to what actually happened in the presidential campaign today, that thing we call news. And I say humbly because in the age of Trump, I have found predicting to be impossible, for me anyway. Joe Biden began his day today the way he often does, with Morning Joe. This time, not just as a viewer.
All right, now for something a little different, and from inside the White House, we have a special guest. Joining us now, the 46th President of the United States and presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden, calling in to Morning Joe right now. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Mika, I'm more than presumption. I'm going to be the Democratic nominee.
There you go.
Okay, well, Mr. President, that leads to the letter that we just received a few minutes ago.
President Biden sent a letter to congressional Democrats this morning saying, quote, fellow Democrats, now that you have returned from the July 4th recess, I want you to know that despite all the speculation in the press and elsewhere, I am firmly committed to staying in this race, to running this race to the end and to beating Donald Trump. I have had extensive conversations with the leadership of the party, elected officials, rank and file members, and most importantly, Democratic voters over these past 10 days or so. I have heard the concerns that people have, their good faith fears and worries about what is at stake in this election. I am not blind to them. Believe me, I know better than anyone the responsibility and the burden the nominee of our party carries. I carried it in 2020 when the fate of our nation was at stake. I also know these concerns come from a place of real respect for my lifetime of public service and my record as president. And I have been moved by the expressions of affection for me from so many who have known me well and supported me over the course of my public life. I've been grateful for the rock-solid, steadfast support from so many elected Democrats in Congress and all across the country, and taken great strength from the resolve and determination I've seen from so many voters and grassroots supporters, even in the hardest of weeks. I can respond to all this by saying clearly and unequivocally, I wouldn't be running again if I did not absolutely believe I was the best person to beat Donald Trump in 2024. We had a Democratic nomination process, and the voters have spoken clearly and decisively. I received over 14 million votes, 87% of the votes cast across the entire nominating process. I have nearly 3,000 delegates, making me the presumptive nominee of our party by a wide margin. This was a process open to anyone who wanted to run. Only 3 people chose to challenge me. One fared so badly that he left the primaries to run as an independent. That's Robert Kennedy he's talking about. Another attacked me for being too old and was soundly defeated. That's Dean Phillips he's talking about. The voters of the Democratic Party have voted. They have chosen me to be the nominee of the party. Do we now just say this process didn't matter, that voters don't have a say? I decline to do that. I feel a deep obligation to the faith and the trust the voters of the Democratic Party have placed in me to run this year. It was their decision to make, not the press, not the pundits, not the big donors, not any selected group of individuals, no matter how well-intentioned. The voters and the voters alone decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. How can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore it in our own party? I cannot do that. I will not do that.
I'm curious, there's a part of it where you talk about the fact that you got 14 million votes, 87% of the vote. It was an open process. You only had 3 people running against you. You have 3,900 delegates. And then you ask this question, do we now just say the process didn't matter, that the voters didn't have a say? I'm curious, is that an allusion also to Donald Trump and the fact that Democrats, you believe, may now be doing the same thing that Donald Trump tried to do in 2020, and that is overthrow the popular will of Democratic voters?
Well, look, Joe, let me say it this way. The reason I've been out on the road so much all over the country, and while Trump is riding around in his golf cart, filling out his golf cart before he even hits the ball. But anyway, he hadn't been anywhere in 10 days. I've been all over the country, number one. And I've gone over the country for several reasons. One, to make sure my instinct was right about the party still wanting me to be the nominee. And look, I attended services, spoke to over 600 people at Mount Airy Church of God in Christ in Philly.
I know I won't look like I'm 40 years old, but I've been around a little bit. The Bishop and I were talking about that. It's heck turned 40. Well, all kidding aside, you know, I've been doing this a long time. And I, honest to God, have never been more optimistic about America's future if we stick together. I really mean it. Here's what else I've learned, and many of you have learned. You walk your faith as well. We're all imperfect beings. We don't know where or what fate will deliver us to or when. What we do know is that we can seek a life of light, hope, love, and truth, no matter what. We can seek that life. Take all of our experiences and give everything we have to work together, because when we do, you can't stop us.
I don't know why it is that you want to make an issue of the president and his condition with stammering and not being able at certain times to bring forth words, while another person lies fluently and you never challenged his lies.
I stopped by campaign field offices with John Fetterman and Madeline Dean, both strongly supporting me.
How many union members here? The sacred union way of life. There's one president that's going to protect that, and he stood up for it every time right there. And now, look at the size of this crowd. Look at the size of this crowd. That's not some kind of narrative that you don't see enough of that. And now I am about to point to the only person that's ever kicked Trump's ass in an election right now. I hope the media is hearing that. Remind you that. Humiliated Trump, broke him, and he had to lie about it. And his minions had to repeat that, and they all got charged and convicted of that. Fox had to cut a check for $800 million trying to talk about those kinds of lies. I am proud to stand right here next to this president right now. He's my president. He's your president. Four more years.
One of the things we're going to change in the second term is we're going to have a fairer tax system. We got a little fair. We made those 55 companies that didn't pay a penny in taxes and made $40 billion. We made them pay, but it's only 23%. So they're not paying, 15%, they're not paying enough. You got out there, literally, you got 1,000 billionaires in America, up to 1,000 billionaires. You know what their average tax rate is? 8.3%. Well, no, but here's the point I want to make, Joe. This is very serious. I'm not joking about this one. The fact of the matter is, Trump wants to give him another, and he's said it, a $5 trillion tax cut over the next 5 years. No, I'm not joking.
We noted yesterday that it was quite a contrast to the people that were supporting you yesterday compared to, say, a lot of the Washington insiders and Hollywood moguls, and go down the list of very powerful people that want you out compared to the support that you had in Pennsylvania yesterday. That said, there are a lot of people of goodwill who love you, who believe you did a great job in your first term, who are still concerned. Yesterday, the topic came up of the Stephanopoulos interview, where you were asked the question, how would you feel if Donald Trump beat you? How would you feel after you lost? And you said, well, as long as I did the best I could do, that's the most important thing. That's caused Democrats concern, who believe that losing is not an option. What would you say to those who are concerned by that answer?
It's not an option, and I've not lost. I haven't lost. I beat him last time. I'll beat him this time.
Before President Biden participated in a discussion with the Congressional Black Caucus tonight, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada, put out a statement stressing that Joe Biden is the nominee.
Mr. Chairman, do you expect full support within the Congressional Black Caucus behind Joe Biden?
Well, we'll have that conversation tonight with the president, and we'll have an opportunity to talk further about that after we have that conversation. But my statement that I put out is on behalf of Nevada and the 4th Congressional District and the 14 million Americans who've already voted to date, including those in Nevada who support his presidency. He is the nominee, and it's time for us to focus on Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress who are trying to roll back our freedoms, our rights, and our opportunities. Freedom for women to make their own health care decisions. Freedom for small businesses to have access to capital. Freedom for us to learn our full history. These fundamental freedoms, these rights, and these opportunities are under attack by Donald Trump and Republicans who have a Project 2025 agenda that will roll us back, not move us forward.
All that, but Joe Biden, you saw him at the debate, and you've seen the polls. Aren't you concerned that he's going to cost you guys the House and the presidency?
I listened to my constituents during the district work period. I'm not going to judge the president on a 90-minute debate. I'm going to focus on the historic wins that we've already achieved, but more importantly, the vision and the action that we'll take with a Democratic majority in the House.
Today, the Democratic leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, said once again that he supports Joe Biden as the nominee.
I made clear publicly the day after the debate that I support President Joe Biden and the Democratic ticket. My position has not changed.
At the White House today, National Security Council spokesperson retired Admiral John Kirby outlined for the White House press corps what to expect in the NATO summit President Biden will be hosting at the White House later this week. Admiral Kirby does not take political questions or campaign questions, and so was understandably a bit uncomfortable today when asked about President Biden's performance at the debate.
Two questions on the fallout from the debate. Have you, in your meetings with him, ever seen him appear similarly to the way he did on debate night?
Look, I'm a spokesman, and
you're in a lot of meetings with him.
I am. The last thing I'm going to do is sit here and talk about every meeting I've had with the president. What I can tell you is, what I saw in that debate is not reflective of the man and the leader and the commander-in-chief that I have spent many, many hours with over the last 2.5 years in terms of the specificity of the way he probes, the questions he asks. Heck, just this morning, he was asking me questions about the situation on the European continent that I couldn't answer, and I told him I had to get back to him.
When he met with governors last week, he suggested he'd like to curtail events that begin after 8 p.m. at night, just because he'd rather focus on resting and doesn't want to have a long day. In your understanding of things, has the National Security Council ever withheld information from him he should have known late at night out of concern he might not be able to process it?
No.
You said broadly that the president, in your view, is not represented by what was on the debate stage. Then you gave us an anecdote about a meeting today where he was engaged and so forth. Are you saying you have never encountered a situation where you thought that he was displaying any of those symptoms or affectations or something that would give pause, or are you just declining to answer one way or another?
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable answering these kinds of questions because as a spokesman, my job is to be an advisor and counselor, and I don't think it's appropriate for a spokesman to... Yeah, I did because I wanted to make it clear. So, yes, I'm uncomfortable with these kinds of questions, but to answer your specific question, in my experience, the last 2.5 years, I have not seen any reason whatsoever to question or doubt his lucidity, his grasp of context, his probing nature, and the degree to which he is completely in charge of facts and figures. And if he isn't, what I've seen is, because it happened to me this morning, when he isn't and when I can't be in command of those facts and figures, I have to fess up and go get the information that he's asking for. And he asked me some questions this morning I didn't have answers for.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Representative Joyce Beatty of Ohio. She's also a former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She attended tonight's meeting with President Biden on the Congressional Black Caucus. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You've been in the most important political meeting of the day that anyone's been in. What can you tell us about what happened in that discussion with the president tonight?
Well, first of all, Lawrence, thanks for having me on. Yes, we received an invitation from President Biden to meet with the Congressional Black Caucus led by our chair, Stephen Horsford. I thought it was a great meeting. Stephen Horsford asked the president to respond to what his plan, what his vision was. I had the distinct opportunity of introducing the president to the caucus, although he did not need an introduction. He thanked me and all others for being with him and supporting him. He was very clear. He reiterated some of the things that was in the 2-page letter that you've also seen, unequivocally unequivocally, he stated that he's running. And I think you have to look at, he was very clear in saying we have a process. He received 14 million of the votes. 87% of those participating in the voting process supported him, some 3,900 delegates. And he went on to talk about how he can beat Donald Trump. And for me, that's the most important thing. We know we saw 4 years of a Trump's leadership, and we know what that did to our freedoms, what it did to our democracy. And now Trump is saying that he wants retribution, he wants revenge, and he lies at every question, every opportunity, versus having a Joe Biden as president who delivers for the American people. We've witnessed what he's done. You can pick a topic. We can talk about health care, which my constituents and others asked about all the time. Putting $35 a month for insulin. We know how many millions and millions of people suffer with diabetes. We could look at the economy. We could look at jobs. 15 million some new jobs that he has created. More money to HBCU. He has also supported Pell Grants in housing and protects our Medicaid and Medicare. So he was very clear that he wants to continue that, and that he clearly is able to beat former President Donald Trump.
Did anyone in the meeting suggest to the president that he should think about stepping down?
We did not have those discussions. It was a discussion for him to make his commitment, outline his future plans, and that we want to be engaged and included with him. It was a very good meeting. It was substantive. He responded well. He was comfortable. He was relaxed, and he was on point. We saw the old Joe Biden. He addressed the issue and said, as he has said openly, that the 90-minute debate, it was a mistake. He didn't do a good job. He was sick. He was tired. He hadn't rested enough. And since then, we've seen him make a comeback. And so he talked about that, and that he would be fully engaged with us and address any questions that we had for him.
What is your confidence level as of tonight in the Biden-Harris ticket?
As you've heard some of our others leaders, Leader Hakeem Jeffries said after the debate and again today, he supports Joe Biden. I fully support Joe Biden to be our nominee for president. I support Vice President Kamala Harris. I think it is a strong ticket. It's the same ticket that people said wouldn't win in 2020, and they not only prevailed and won, they have saved our democracy in this country.
Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, thank you very much for joining us tonight
you.
after that very important meeting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, he was Senator Raphael Warnock's successful campaign manager in Georgia when everyone thought it was impossible. Now he is the principal deputy campaign manager for the Biden-Harris campaign. Quentin Folks will join us next.
Moms, she passed them down to you. But who passed them to her? Ancestry DNA can show you the people and places they came from. Your genes are one of a kind. Find out why with Ancestry DNA.
You gotta see this. Scotty Schwartz, we are following some breaking news. Severe storms continue to wreak havoc. The Supreme Court put a pause on a controversial immigration law. Protesters have redoubled their numbers right here at this makeshift barricade. The future of TikTok as we know it is at risk. Is this a ban or not? The craziest ride I have ever hitched. That is totality. Do you see yourselves in space?
I could go to space.
How you feeling? I feel great. Stay tuned now, weeknights at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on NBC News Now.
When you're competitive, that breeds greatness. Gymnastics is judged based off of how perfect you are. That is a good motivator and goal to try to achieve perfection when it's so hard.
The Olympics from Paris starts July 26th on NBC and Peacock.
Born with cerebral palsy, and now he's the American Ninja Warrior champion.
I was literally told I wouldn't be able to walk when I was a kid.
The amount of training, the sacrifice.
Oh, what a
We can face
what an inspiration,
insurmountable challenges.
His first ever buzzer. Ninjas in session.
Let's get to it. I want to be the first mom to beat stage 1.
This year it's about saying goodbye.
Give this man his wings.
Nobody that's won American Ninja Warrior has come back and done it again.
He might have a shot.
Hitting the buzzer, that would be like winning gold.
American Ninja Warrior, Monday on NBC and Peacock.
Lester Holt, America's most trusted TV news anchor.
More Americans turn to NBC News than any other news organization.
I love this moment, when the audience knows the show's about to begin. A great show tells a great story. It transports you. It makes you feel. This summer, one of our greatest stories will be told in a way we've never seen before, when the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics is staged here on the Seine. The wait is almost over.
There's a difference between a great golf setting and a setting for great golf.
Unbelievable.
This isn't just the Open, it's golf, as it's meant to be. The Open Championship on NBC, USA, and Peacock, part of the greatest summer of golf.
We, us, Lady Parts, will be recording an album. An album? A hit record. An opus.
We still got to pay for the studio time. We need 2,000 pounds.
No, shillings.
The time had come to do what we do best. Lady Parts, assemble. You guys better go out there, show the world who we are.
We were in our Bellum era, baby.
Is that grease on your pants, or are you just happy to see me?
This has changed our relationship completely.
You need to figure it out or you're both gone.
Don't drop the anchor.
Disaster.
I love you so much. We do.
When I was working in the Senate, I didn't realize that it's the perfect training for the job that I have now. Covering government, covering politics, the complexity of it all. You learn how to explain that and how to live through that when you work in this building. Mastering the detail is crucial to being able to present anything that happens in Senate buildings like this or any of the other news centers that we have to focus on every day. Joining our discussion now is Quentin Folks, Principal Deputy Campaign Manager for the Biden-Harris re-election campaign. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I wanted to get your reaction to what Donald Trump just said in the last hour. He was on Fox for 20 minutes of basically ranting about the southern border without a single sentence that I could transcribe and present to you to make any sense. In the middle of it all, there was exactly one line that I could understand and make sense of. Talking about President Biden, Donald Trump said, he's destroying Social Security. That is the only thing that Donald Trump said about Social Security. There wasn't a sentence after that to explain what he meant by what he said there. What is the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden on Social Security?
In this instance, Donald Trump is a liar. We saw him do it on the debate stage. Donald Trump has been hell-bent on gutting Social Security and Medicare since the moment he was elected. He has doubled down on it, and every single time he gets in front of a microphone, he lies and tries to moderate his position on it. But Donald Trump does not care about Social Security. He does not care about seniors. He honestly doesn't care about anyone except himself, which is why he is in this race in the first place, to be a dictator. And the Supreme Court that he largely appointed have just given him the keys to do it. Look at Project 2025. I encourage Americans across the country to look it up. It's terrifying. We should be afraid. He wants to gut checks and balances, get rid of departments like the Department of Education, monitor women's pregnancies, fill cabinet positions with Trump loyalists who are going to continue to take away people's rights and freedoms. Americans should look at it. It was written for Trump by people closest to him. He is trying to distance himself from it, but this is Donald Trump's platform. It is extreme and it is dangerous.
We saw President Biden out there on the road this weekend while Donald Trump was, as President Biden said, doing absolutely nothing. How much campaigning are you going to be able to mix into what's coming now with the NATO summit?
Look, the president is committed to continuing to communicate directly to American voters so that they can see him in their communities where it matters most. You heard the president this morning on Morning Joe talk about what he did. We did these events because the president wanted to go out and hear directly from voters. You heard clips earlier in the show from Congressman Horsford, Leader Jeffries, talking about what they did. They spent time in their districts listening to voters because voters pick presidents, and the voters have overwhelmingly said that Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee. You just heard Congresswoman Beatty lay out the fact that President Biden got 87% of the 14 million votes cast. He holds 3,900 delegates, an overwhelming majority. That is what President Biden is committed to doing, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to get the president in front of as many people as possible to lay out the stakes of this election, which are quite simply, President Biden wakes up every single day fighting for the American people. Donald Trump is only in this campaign for revenge, retribution, and continuing to excite political extremism across this country.
So far, I believe there's 9 Democratic members of the House, approximately, who have said President Biden should step down as the nominee, serve out his term, and help create another ticket. That's, of course, that's less than 5% of the Democrats in the House of Representatives. But there are 2 senators. I want to read you 2 senators' statements, Democratic senators, because they are both highly influential senators. And one is Elizabeth Warren. This is the one you're going to like. She told the Boston Globe tonight, President Biden is our nominee. He is an excellent president. He works hard on behalf of working families every day. That's Senator Elizabeth Warren speaking to the Boston Globe. Senator Patty Murray says something different. She says, I have a deep appreciation and a strong respect for Joe, who has led a historic first term as president. Still, we need to see a much more forceful and energetic candidate on the campaign trail in the very near future in order for him to convince voters he is up to the job. I believe President Biden must do more to demonstrate he can campaign strong enough to beat Donald Trump. Do you take that that statement from Patty Murray basically as your kind of strategic campaign marching orders at this point?
I take it as a continuation of everything that we have been doing. The president has been out and about. It is going to be a continuation of a robust travel schedule across the country into our battleground states, communicating with voters directly where they are. We're going to continue opening field offices, almost at 300 now. We're going to continue hiring staff in battleground states. We're going to continue to build a volunteer base to take the message directly to American voters. The president has been out. We just saw him in Philadelphia. He was at a church. He was in Madison, Wisconsin, did a rally. The president has been meeting with congressional leaders, talking about what's at stake in this election and the work that they must continue to do. All of these people who are, giving recommendations and talking about what the president should and shouldn't do, they are patriots. They care about their country. They were involved in passing a lot of the legislation that President Biden has signed into law, and under his leadership have delivered real things for the American people. So all of this comes from a place of goodwill. And we take it as a sign that we now need to come together as a Democratic Party to defeat Donald Trump, because he is extreme, dangerous, out of touch from the American people. But the voters have spoken. President Biden is the presumptive Democratic nominee. Our campaign has earned that, and we're going to continue to build on what we have to this point to make sure we're communicating our message to American voters directly.
So the Biden-Harris campaign owns the Democratic convention. In addition to running this presidential campaign and moving your candidates around, you also have to be planning the Democratic convention, the lineup of speakers, everything, entertainment, everything. Is that planning for a Biden-Harris convention going ahead as it normally would be at this time?
Never stopped at all. Joe Biden is the nominee. We've known it since we wrapped up the Democratic primary process with force. Voters overwhelmingly spoke. We're excited about hosting a convention in Chicago. We look forward to telling the story of President Biden and Vice President Harris and the second-term vision that they have for this country.
Quentin Folks, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up, Donald Trump's favorite judge, Aileen Mercedes Cannon, denied a motion by one of Donald Trump's co-defendants to dismiss the criminal case against that co-defendant. That's next with Andrew Weissman.
It won't be hard to find someone to fix this. But before I started Angie's List, different story. A lot has changed for us at Angie since then, but the issues facing homeowners are the same. And the solution too, skilled local pros. Get started at Angie.com.
The paper towel will absorb the acid.
That's crazy. Green tea to calm acne. Top magnifier. We can zoom in. Oh, look at that.
The steam from the ice takes out all the wrinkles. The way to get it out is to use the shell that is left over. It works every single time.
This is my favorite tip of the day.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Personal finance is personal. You don't want to do what somebody else is doing.
Oh, that's genius. You just saved me $40. That's a good idea.
The ladies of Dubai
Everybody's really hot. I'm the hottest.
live by one rule.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
The Real Housewives of Dubai. All new episodes Wednesdays on Peacock.
The password is password.
Oh.
This.
Password? Password, Tuesday on NBC and Peacock.
I can't imagine doing a race like this with somebody else.
$500,000. That would change everything.
We're cold, we're wet, and we have no food.
I'm gonna keep going until I can.
We can think faster, we can move faster.
I can't jump there. Are you okay?
What we care about is the end crate and getting $500,000.
Race to Survive New Zealand. New episodes Mondays at 11 on USA.
When I run, they'll say on your mark and they'll say set and the gun goes off and it's just a humongous explosion of energy. When you're at your very top speed, it feels like you can run forever. And then there's this one moment where everybody else starts to die and you're like, I'm not about to die. I'm about to get faster. My ambition is to change the world. Whether that's fashion, music, racing, of course. I put action to my dreams.
The Olympics from Paris starts July 26th on NBC and Peacock.
How do you sort of mine for insights that work across the world?
I'll give you an example from our chocolate brand, Dove Galaxy. Its purpose is to empower women all throughout its supply chain. We are aiming to impact 1 million people. And the campaign idea that the team came up with is, your pleasure has promise. And they tested it in China, in the UK, in the Middle East, works everywhere. Because human-to-human impact, that insight of helping your fellow person, no matter where you are in the world, it just resonates. Yeah. And if it is true and connected to the brand, which in our case it is to Dove Galaxy, it's just very natural. And the consumers can see that.
Closer to the Gaza border. A story of resilience and hope. Please take care of yourself and each other.
4 years of hard work, 4 years of dedication. Everything comes down to this moment.
What a way to start it off. Bring home the gold. That's why you put that guy on that relay.
Australia has been unbelievable. The greatest female swimmer of all time. Wow.
Welcome back, Simone Biles.
She continues to amaze us every single time she competes.
This is a story about getting away with treachery and coming back stronger.
These people don't disappear, they just go underground.
Rachel Maddow presents Ultra, Season 2 of the chart-topping original podcast. Listen now.
On Saturday, Florida federal judge Aileen Mercedes Cannon denied defendant Walt Nauta's motion to dismiss the charges against him. Walt Nauta is one of Donald Trump's co-defendants in Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's case, charging Donald Trump with violations of the Espionage Act and possession of classified material. Defendant Walt Nauta's motion to dismiss claimed that he was the victim of, quote, selective and vindictive prosecution. Judge Cannon said, quote, there is no evidence, end quote, to support Walt Nauta's claims about the prosecution. No evidence. Also on Saturday, Judge Cannon gave Jack Smith's team until July 18th to respond to a new motion by Donald Trump's lawyers claiming the case should be dismissed now because of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity. Joining us now is Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and former chief of the criminal division in the Eastern District of New York. He is an MSNBC legal analyst and co-author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Trump Indictments. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us tonight. That Walt Nauta dismissal seems to be motion where that she denied seems to be one of those things where she does the only reasonable thing you can possibly do under the circumstances, but of course drags out these processes as long as possible.
Absolutely. And I think one way to look at this, and certainly the way I look at it, is that the law clearly would not support granting Walt Nauta's motion. And if she had granted it, it certainly would have been appealed. That is something she clearly does not want. She has been reversed twice by the 11th Circuit. And if she gets appealed again and loses, that gives the circuit court an ability to remove her from the case. What I also find notable is while the judge decided Walt Nauta's motion with respect to selective and vindictive prosecution, she did not decide Donald Trump's. And you might be thinking, well, why not? I mean, they're virtually identical motions. Obviously, they have different facts, but they could have been decided together. And I think the reason is it would be a huge victory for the government because Donald Trump is busy touting publicly that he is being selectively prosecuted. He is being vindictively prosecuted. The facts and the law, though, just don't support that. And so I think that Judge Cannon, by just ruling on Walt Nauta's, is putting off having to issue a ruling that is going to be favorable for the government and that is going to really undermine Donald Trump's sort of political claims about the prosecution.
So Judge Cannon is now going to consider the possibility that this new Supreme Court decision, which is about conduct by presidents while in office, can somehow affect a case about what the president did after he left office.
Okay, the reason for that, because some people are going to be thinking, I don't understand if it's conduct that happened either before he was president or after he was president, how does immunity have anything to do with that? And that's because one of the outrageous things that the Supreme Court said is, even in a case where you have a sort of personal conduct, unofficial conduct that is sort of after Donald Trump was president or before he was president, the government cannot use as evidence any evidence that relates to his official duties while in office. And so that will be the issue. It's really much more of an evidentiary issue about what evidence could be used at the trial. Some of it we know about, some of it may be in classified proceedings. It certainly shouldn't lead to the dismissal of the case. But I would note that Judge Cannon is contemplating this motion for a stay of the proceeding. And what she essentially did is said, OK, I'm going to cure that. And in the interim, I'm going to stay a whole bunch of deadlines while I wait to have briefing on whether there should be a stay. I mean, you can't make this up as to any excuse to stay things and delay them.
Andrew Weissman, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
And coming up, the polls were wrong again, really wrong. This time in France, where the right wing was crushed in this weekend's election. What's the lesson for the United States? That's next.
The ladies of Dubai
Everybody's really hot. I'm the hottest.
live by one rule.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
The Real Housewives of Dubai. All new episodes Wednesdays on Peacock.
It's Monday, everyone.
Happy to have you here on this Monday night. Lots of news to get to tonight.
Do you think Trump's conviction is going to be an issue that's going to influence people who may be undecided, on the fence?
I wondered what effect a sort of constant threat of violence has had on you and on your ability to do your work. This is a huge day in the news.
Is every Monday night like this?
What if? What if? What if dreams came true? What if America's greatest basketball players were all stacked on one team? This summer, the dream comes true at the Paris Olympics.
Saturday, September 7th, it's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event with your favorite MSNBC hosts. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets.
I hope you weren't shocked by this, but the polls were wrong again. This time in France. Yesterday, voters in France said no
And here in France, there was a big one. Every poll, and polls in France are normally reliable, gave Marine Le Pen's far-right anti-immigration national rally party as victorious, becoming by far the biggest party in parliament in the legislative elections that just happened. Well, no, we discover again that the French resistance to nationalist adventure is powerful. It's deep-rooted. This is a party that had quasi-fascist roots. France lived the trauma of the Vichy regime, collaborationist Vichy regime. That is long ago, you may say, but deep in the French culture is this resistance. And we learned that. And of course, we had a surprise in the United States too recently at the presidential debate. And the consequences of that will have to play out. It's not the French problem. The president here is 46. The prime minister is 35. And Jordan Bardella, who was putting himself forward to become prime minister if the national rally had won, is 28. So I think what you've just said is very encouraging. Democracies are open systems, and they can produce shock results.
So President Macron, it seems, saw something that the polls did not see. That's basically what Joe Biden is claiming now, too. But in France, it was his decision. He had the confidence to say, let's have this election now.
Yeah, Lawrence, he took a huge gamble. He plunged the country into chaos ahead of the Olympics, which are opening in less than 3 weeks. In fact, the Olympic flame arrives in Paris on Sunday, which is also Bastille Day. I'm not sure that he was completely confident of obtaining this result. And there was an incredible scramble in the second round of voting after the National Rally did very well in the first, to bring the center and the left, even if they disagreed on many, many things, together to resist the National Rally. President Macron wanted a clarification. It's a very foggy situation right now. The parliament is equally divided, but pretty much equally divided between the left, the center, and the far right. And I think France will have to get used to the idea of long negotiation to form a coalition government like other European countries, like, say, Italy or the Netherlands. It's not really in the French culture. I spoke to an expert here yesterday who said, you have to understand, in France, we're all would-be Napoleons.
That's going to have to be the last word tonight. Roger Cohen, thank you very much for joining us from Paris tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. That is tonight's Last Word. The 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle starts now.
Tonight, Joe Biden defies calls to end his run for the White House, telling Democrats, I am not going anywhere. Plus, the election that pushed back against the far right. Could what just happened in France happen here in the U.S.? Then Donald Trump and Project 2025, why he's now distancing himself from a radical right-wing agenda from his own allies, as the 11th hour gets underway on this Monday night. Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Ruhle, and we are now 120 days away from the election. And as President Biden begins a week that some say may decide his political future, he has come out swinging. Today, the president forcefully pushed back on Democrats who want him to drop out of the race, saying that the voters have spoken and daring a potential alternative candidate to challenge him at next month's convention. Here's my colleague Kelly O'Donnell with the details.
The message from President Biden today, the debate over his debate is over.
I am not going anywhere.
The president says he has now assessed the country's mood after visiting voters across battleground states. Today, he phoned in to MSNBC's Morning Joe.
I wanted to make sure I was right, that the average voter out there still wanted Joe Biden, and I'm confident they do.
The First Lady amplified